My name is Jill Harris. I'm the voice of Suletta Mercury and Mobile Suit Gundam, the Witch from Mercury, and you are listening to the Gundam Watch.
Hey Dallas.
Yeah.
You seen Branson somewhere?
I'm
Y'all are kind of late.
late for what?
Well, you'll have a joint session about Branson grieving the tomato.
Oh, right, that thing. So Branson got caught up. He was in the transmission room, and there was a message coming in that he was trying. He wasn't getting the decoding process right, and so he said he'd be here as quickly as possible. I think we kind of forgot.
Okay. I guess tomato is not as important now. Maybe
I
that's
mean,
progress.
I don't think that the walking, talking tomato that John fed to everybody was important, but apparently it was important to Branson.
Right. So next week, we'll meet with the two of you. How about that?
Do we have to?
I can see it now.
I feel like John needs to be present for that one.
Okay. So we're having a family session in a week.
Wasn't even
all
there.
Hear people's thoughts and emotions, and we need to work together as a family. We are living on this base like a family.
I mean, we could just build giant robots.
We cannot build a giant robot every time you have an emotional upset, Dallas.
Oh, man.
General Romeo coming in, begin transmission. Should you accept it now, here's your mission. Take your pilot seat and turn on your television. Logging into the Gundam Watch. What is a Gundam? We're gonna answer that question. From back in the classics to the newer expansion. Explore the lore with Dallas, Mora, and Branson. Welcome to the Gundam Watch. Moyagare, come and join the Gundam Watch. Kashiagare, come and join the Gundam Watch. Yamigaeru, come and join the Gundam Watch. Tobeo, Gandamu, come and join the Gundam Watch. Brought to you by Geek Devotions comes another podcast to keep your feet in motion. Listening close and see what's all the commotion. Logging into the Gundam Watch. Dallas and Branson bringing their fandom to you with the passion of the veteran instructing the new. We're diving deep, but this ain't B's views and reviews. Welcome to the Gundam Watch.
Hello, Gundam fans, and those who like to become Gundam fans. Welcome to the Gundam Watch, a podcast part of the Geek Devotions Podcast Network, a network of podcasts that are devoted to letting you know that you're loved. So if you don't listen past this moment, know this: we love you, we care about you. There is a plan and a purpose for your life. Do not give up. I'm Dallas. I'm so glad you guys could be joining us here on Shiro Base, high above the planet Geekery. And today, ladies and gentlemen, I'm excited to be continuing our journey through Mobile Suit Gundam Wing. We are flying a little bit down a couple crew members. We got one in the med bay with the Guyver unit stuck to his head, and then Branson apparently is out there decoding something. We may hear from him later. I'm not sure. That being said, I am not flying solo today, ladies and gentlemen, because I am joined by my beautiful and talented, my licensed professional counselor sister, who I cannot see on a professional basis to help me with my issues because we're family, but she's still amazing, Damara Mora.
Good day, sir. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I'm fine. I don't know why I need to be in this whole conversation about the tomato. It wasn't my fault. I wasn't even there when it happened. I ate the tomato. But this is really between John and Branson.
You ate the tomato, but you have nothing to do with the tomato conversation.
I mean, I didn't even eat it. I slid it out of the sandwich because I don't eat tomatoes.
So you rejected the tomato on top of that.
I totally rejected the tomato.
Okay, I can still see this going south. We can't avoid this, you know? Our brothers need healing.
All right. Well, we'll get into that. That's not what we're talking about today. Ladies and gentlemen, we're getting into somebody else's psychological issues, and that is the issues of some poor Gundam pilots who are going through some major trauma. So what?
They don't have tomato issues.
They don't have tomato issues at all. For those of you wondering about the tomato issues, make sure you check out the Bottom Shelf podcast. You'll figure it out. So no tomato issues, Damara, but issues galore. Are you excited to be jumping into today's episodes?
I am. I'm always excited every time we do this because it's like reliving our childhood each time.
Right.
But in this particular case, as a therapist, this is. I mean, I don't think I remembered this being so much as a child. Like, this is legit.
I know, right? It's a lot deeper. It's interesting. You and I are both coming from very different but similar fields. We both help people in different ways. You obviously coming from a counseling point of view, me coming as a minister, and we've seen some trauma in people. So we're both seeing some stuff in some people. I'm really excited to talk about with you here in a little bit. But that being said, Damara, let's go to our viewing pods, give our expectations, and then let's talk about some Gundam.
Loading episode expectations.
All right, let's get the coffee. This is going to be even worse than the other one. So, expectation. Well, we're about to find out exactly what grief looks like when it's not dealt with. All right, time to hit play.
All right, into the pod we go. All right, expectations for this next set of episodes. Let's see here. I was hoping to see more of the Zero in action, and also I was hoping to see more of Death Sight and the new Shenlong, but clearly we did not see as much as I want to. So I'm hoping to see more of that, more of the action, the fight scenes in those. This is really the point of the series. To me, it starts to amp up for the better. So this should be interesting. My expectations is just to have fun today. All right, we're out of the viewing pods. I'm a little stiff from being in there.
One.
Say what?
I'm a little stiff on that one.
I know, right?
My hand's a little stiff too. I actually took notes. I don't ever take notes, and I took notes.
I'm so proud of you.
I'm kind of proud of myself too.
That's a habit John's taken up, is taking notes too.
Mm-hmm.
He's a note taker now. Well, let's jump into it. Let's talk about these episodes. We'll start off. So what we're doing, guys, we're shifting the format again, and instead of us breaking every episode one by one, what we're going to do from this moving forward is we're going to actually just kind of do everything in one full swoop all together. So with that being said, let me read the description for episodes 24 through 26. Episodes were titled The Gundam They Called Zero, Catra versus Hero, and then The Eternal Flame of the Shooting Stars, which, to be honest, is a funny name to me. Let's get into it. Catra, now mentally unstable, who would have guessed, appears in the newly constructed Wing Gundam Zero and begins to destroy various colonies one by one. In response, Lady Une sends Hero and Troa to fight back in the Mercurius and the V8, while Tubarov, finding Une's behavior to be too lenient, stages a coup against her and cuts off the air supply to Wu Fei, Duo, and the Gundam engineers' cells. Hero fights Catra in a near vain attempt to demonstrate that the colonies no longer need the Gundams. But when that fails, Troa forces Catra to realize his own kindness is paying the ultimate price for this war. Meanwhile, the Romefeller Foundation proposes to replace all Oz mobile suits with their new Virgo mobile dolls, and Treize is imprisoned when he refuses to support this. Lady Une, who learns of Tubarov's treachery, is shot by Tubarov when she unlocks Duo and Wu Fei's cell, allowing them to escape with their new yet incomplete Gundams, Death Scythe Hell and Ultron Gundam. Hero and Catra are saved by members of the Treize faction, consisting of soldiers still loyal to Treize, and meet the Gundam engineers. They explain that the Wing Gundam Zero uses the system known as Zero, which increases skills but takes away free will, thus driving the pilot insane. They are captured again by Oz soldier Trant Clark, who forces Hero to test the Zero system to gather data. However, This causes Hero to go on his own rampage with the Wing Zero. Inside the lunar base, Katra manages to stop Hero before his insanity destroys them all, and their pair then escape to Earth. So, as the description of these several episodes, let me pull up my notes here because we got a few things we need to discuss, Damara.
There's a lot. So, like, go at this at starting with just the various Gundams that are coming out and the issues that are going on in that realm. We can go into the middle state. This could not be more loaded.
I know, right? Like, there was we talked about this last episode that we kind of, before we hit this story arc, there was kind of a lull in the storytelling. There was a lot of conversation, a lot of prologue that was taking place, but as a whole, the action didn't take place at all. Whereas now, there's a lot happening, and even the conversations I find a little bit more interesting as they kind of dive into some of the conversations about the aristocrats and just the stuff that Tro is dealing with, or not Tro, that Catch was dealing with.
Mm-hmm. So,
Sorry, go on.
where do you want to start?
Let's start with this. There's an interesting moment where Catra's kind of having this freak out, and to me, let me know what your thoughts are. He's dealing with the same thing that happens with a lot of soldiers when they come back from war, when they come back from a major conflict, and they've been fighting for a purpose, but then they discover their purpose is no longer needed, or that it's been lost. So for that being said, his whole thing is, protect the colonies, but now colonies are Oz, so you got to get rid of Oz, because that's his whole thing, is we got to get rid of Oz. He's struggling with that, and that's what Tro is trying to put in his head. He's like, look, the war's over, dude. It's time to, you may not like it, but we've lost, and it's time for us to move on.
Mm-hmm. So, I think this is one of those moments where not all the Gundam pilots have lost what they're fighting for.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those things that when you fight for a country or something and the ideology of that country begins to shift,
Mm-hmm.
it's like you don't agree with the shift. You may
Right.
completely be against it, but it's still your home country. And there's still innocent lives of various opinions still sitting in that area. What do you do?
Right.
In this moment, Catra's lost all of that. But then you have like Troa and you have the other Gundam pilots that are like, we're still protecting the people. We don't want to destroy colonies. We don't want to wage war with the colony itself.
Right.
We just now have to find a different way because this isn't working. And in like when we go in to the beginning of episode 24 and the appearance of this Gundam that looks remarkably similar to another Gundam.
I remember when we watched this originally as kids, even today, knowing what it is, I had a hard time distinguishing this design from the original Wing.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was that double barrel, and I think they even mentioned that in the episode that it's double barreled and it comes apart. And I think that was the big thing that we noticed as kids was the fact that the gun was different.
Yeah.
And I don't think later
the wings also played a little bit of it. Also, these wings tend to be more rounded, whereas the 01 wings they were more flat.
Mm-hmm. So they're not extremely obvious outside of that gun.
Mm-hmm.
But it's definitely to show that you can have two things that look similar, but their entire interior and how they function can be vastly different.
Yeah.
And that was a great display on the Wing Zero, because the Wing Zero is so different, and the entire intellectual piece that's inside of it it was built to be the ultimate weapon.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's scary. I mean, we think about that in modern history. We have a lot of weapons that have been built over the years in every single country, and the question does become, what do you do with it once it's there?
Right.
It's too dangerous to have. What do you do with that? And in this case, in this show, you have this beast of a machine that's been built, and you had scientists that are sitting here going, we cannot actually build this.
Right. Well, that's the thing. I did some research into it. This was the design they had, and they intentionally built it on the back end of the tall geese basically taking away from them and what was taking place. And but it was one of those things, if I read correctly, they came up with everything, but they were terrified about the consequences of what it was.
Mhm.
So the fact that the zero system removes the free will of the pilot, which to be perfectly honest with you, Damara, I found interesting in the fact that basically it creates a mobile doll situation. It's just that instead of a computer running, it's the humans running it still on the inside.
Mhm. But I do
And
want
which yeah.
I mean, we've seen the entire show.
Yeah.
Part of this thing, when you do get a chance and you start to see it, yeah, it took a moment for Hero to get shaken out of it and get out
Mhm.
of the Wing Zero.
Yeah.
But it's also a matter of saying someone can force or try and take your free will away,
Mm,
but that doesn't mean it actually owns you.
exactly.
And that's I'm reminded of Viktor Frankl. He wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning,
Hmm.
and he lived through the Holocaust. That
Yeah.
he created an entire counseling theory after he came out of being in this concentration camp. I mean, the whole purpose was to demean and strip them away and eradicate an entire race. And a lot of them came out.
The whole purpose of the Holocaust was not the
Yeah,
book.
yeah, the Holocaust, not the book. But I mean, you have an entire people group that came out that while their free will was stripped of them, they
Mhm.
never actually lost what they were rooted in,
Mhm.
and they didn't lose their identity. A lot of people learned their identity was 100% built into them, and it was not based on other people.
Mhm.
In this particular case, getting out of the depths of history here, the Wing Zero is a massive test almost. But in this point in this episode, we don't all we see is this beats of a machine, and we see
Mhm.
the after effect of what happens when you engage in something and you are not okay before you get in there.
Yeah.
And in Catra's case, he was far from being okay. And he also decided to jump into a machine he didn't know everything about. He followed a blueprint, he put it together, and he got in. And in this case, I mean, this could have completely destroyed him.
Well, and I think it was on the verge of, if it wasn't for the fact that Troa had appealed to the humanity of Catra in the midst of things. And then, because if you notice, like Catra's shift was when he saw the consequences of what was taking place, which is honestly that's a thing that takes place in real life when people are dealing with trauma, and they go through a you know the better term for me, not manic, but when they black out and they're just acting and possibly in a fit of rage, and but then there's a moment when there's someone that can grab their attention and make them face the reality, the consequences.
Mhm.
They snap out of it. If Troa had not stepped in and done that, and then coupled with heroes plain statements of "you're the reason why Troa is dying,"
Yeah.
then those two things happening together, it would have ended up killing Catra in the end.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with you. I think it would have
Hmm.
ended up killing him, and I think when we deal with anything that takes over our life in mental health or whatever it is, and for this, it 100% reminds me of working with people in recovery from addiction.
Hmm.
100%, they lose so much touch that
Mm.
it does take a moment where one thing can seep right through and it clicks, all the consequences, all the reactions of what you're doing
Right.
finally click. And the scary thing is, and what I loved about this display is the first time Catra destroys a colony, he's got tears in his eyes and he doesn't understand why.
Hmm.
That can happen is where your subconscious 100%, the heart of you is not completely gone. And we saw a glimpse of that in that episode where we have the tears, and then Troa is able to, get past it. And then you have Hero that comes along and goes, hello, your best friend, someone that you deeply care about is like, he's dying right now. Come on,
Yeah.
wake up.
Yeah. Which was interesting because like it What I find interesting or beautiful about the situation is Hero pulled Catra out, but then it took Catra to pull Hero out. Catra, knowing the terrible things that the Zero system could do to the mind, then had to use his own knowledge of his personal experience to help Hero, who thought really Hero thought he could handle it. Let's
Mhm.
be honest with it. Hero was like, I'm a good soldier. Because that was the whole thing. There was like the perfect soldier is the only one that can handle it. And Hero's like, yeah, I'm down for this. And he had to help him to come out of that whole situation himself.
Well, and it also redefines what is actually a perfect soldier.
Yeah.
Because going through the motions is not a perfect soldier. The very core of who you are
Mm-hmm.
defines what creates that perfect soldier. And in Heroes, despite the fact he's got some pride issues in that moment, he's not too far off from being
Right.
the perfect soldier. But just like you said, it took someone who's been there and done that to go, you may be able to master this darn thing one time, but today is not it because you're forgetting this.
Right. Absolutely.
It's
And
kind
that's that.
of, go
So
ahead.
what?
I think
No.
that's the moment where we get a glimpse at Catcher coming back to himself and really beginning to recover from the brokenness that happened before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I concur. Really, it's hard to expound on the story past this whole interaction, in my opinion, because that's really what this was all about. There's a lot of things that took place in episode 26, with Trey's and his faction he's developed, and that's interesting stuff. But to me, the central thing was dealing with Zero as a whole, and the in um the effect of Zero. Like you and I both know, and spoilers for anybody, from this point forward, the introduction of the Zero system, it's a big ordeal. Like it changes the show moving forward in a lot of fashions.
Mm-hmm. It
So
definitely does. And it's what I think is hilarious to me is
mhm,
growing up and even now, I've always loved Death Sight like that
mhm,
for whatever reason.
right.
But Wing Zero, specifically this Gundam, always still was a favorite of mine.
Mhm,
And even now, thinking about it and watching this episode, I'm sitting here seeing this Gundam finally come out,
mhm.
seeing it, but also I think it was because you really have to know yourself before you could be in that kind of machine.
Yeah,
I think that's why I liked it.
I can get that. I get behind that.
It's
There was something special about Zero as a whole. Like both when he came out of the screen, we're like, "Woo, that's the suit. That's it. That's the big boy."
we knew what it was, but at the same time, it wasn't so different. And also, this was the first Wing Zero One, or not
Mhm,
Wing Zero One, Zero One was the first one we ever saw.
mhm.
And it was already massively impressive. It was entering Earth's atmosphere without any assistance, and then this thing comes out, and
Right.
you know darn well it can do the same thing the other one, but better.
Exactly. Exactly. It was the upgrade. And that's the thing is we're now in the season of the upgrade for everybody. And since we're here talking about these upgrades, let's talk about these upgrades of Wu Fei and Catra's Gundams. Not Catra, I'm sorry.
Dude,
Duo's Gundams. Um let's start off with your favorite, Death Scythe. This one's been upgraded to what they call Death Scythe Hell, and he's got some new armaments going towards him. Starting with really to me, it looks like a um, those old movies where like there's that mysterious stranger and he's got like a cloak that he's wearing over himself as he walks through the darkness.
yeah,
That's kind of what it looks like. And with his scythe, it looks a lot more like the Grim Reaper than before.
I think it does too. I think it just kind of made it more. I felt like it stood out more, to be honest with
Hmm. Yeah,
you, than it
definitely.
came out. I remember seeing the first time when it came out, and I wasn't actually a big fan of what cloaks him at first.
Hmm.
But then he opens it, and you see a massive wingspan come off of him,
Right.
which makes him look bigger than he ever was, and then the entire machine just looks more impressive.
Yeah.
So they created a wingspan on Death Sight that had extra purpose. They weren't just there. They're not just supposed
Hmm.
to flap and get them around or something like that. It was part of the armor. I
Yeah.
really liked it. And, of course, the Death Sight has 2 beams instead of 1.
Hmm.
Um, so, I mean, I liked it. I like the smaller improvements that were on it. I mean,
Hmm.
what I did like about these 2 coming out the way they did is they're not massive changes. It's just like what you see on the Wing Zero. You don't see a massive amount of change,
Hmm.
but it's just enough that it's like they've learned from the last Death Sight. This is something he might need. It is more custom. That's such bad English coming out of my mouth. Okay. The Death Sight was 100%. The next one is 100% built better for Duo. Like they've
Yeah.
seen him in battle. It's been customized. It's just working for him.
Yeah. The way that I'm reading on the website Gundam.fandom talking about it, and apparently some of the stuff that they've upgraded with it was that the obviously you have the 2 beam scythes going on right now, but they also that cloak that they made has a couple purposes. One, it adds to some invisibility cloaking devices into it, but also it's more durable. So you can actually take bigger hits and more hits so that he can get closer to people to do his whole thing, his stuff. He really is a in fighter. Like that's his thing as a whole. And
Mhm.
the designs that they made for him were specifically based around the whole idea of get in closer, so better cloaking technology, but so that when he does get close, he doesn't take as many hits or doesn't get as damaged, so he can get closer to handle the situation he needs to handle.
Mhm.
So, which I think that's really his style as a whole, especially when you go back to his childhood, where he was raised in the orphanage, he was raised in the streets, he was a pickpocketer, um, and that's really his thing. And so, I think you hit it on the head where they really base this around the personality of him a lot more than before.
Mhm. I was pulling up pictures just of the 2 Gundams next to each other. Um and it's almost like these Gundams may actually be taller than the other one.
Mm,
Like I feel like they may be bigger.
I
But
don't know.
they may actually be bigger than each other.
Maybe. Except I do appreciate like it's definitely a lot more intimidating, especially with that wingspan taking place.
Mhm.
So one of the things that they're saying also is both this one and Wu Fei's new suit, they're also both specifically designed to be better in space. So there's some thrusters that are attached to it to help it fly around in a better fashion.
Yeah. So they're basically built now we have 2 Gundams that can be in the Earth's atmosphere and outside of it,
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Exactly.
which
All
means
right.
it's just they built it better. But I do want to point out before we go over to the next Gundam that comes out, they aren't actually complete machines.
Yeah.
Had to release them before they were done and look at the damage that happens from these 2 and they're not at 100%.
And they're fighting the Virgos, which to be honest, that's a pretty hardcore mobile suit. I mean, it's the combination of the V8 and the Mercurius. It has both the firepower and the shielding ability.
Mhm.
It has their mobile doll technology that everyone loves, and they still just wipe the floor with these
They're
guys. Like
like,
I'm watching the clip right now on my side monitor, and it's just like they're going to town on these guys.
yeah, I mean, I think it's hilarious now because we're looking back on it and we have the actual thought as adults to go, what is that other doll supposed to be capable of doing? Because I remember the kid thinking, oh, it's just a stupid suit. It's not a Gundam, so it's gonna fail. And as an adult, I'm going, they weren't supposed to fail.
Exactly.
They're supposed to be pretty big and bad. And we were thinking when the V8 and all that comes out, they were modeled to be similar to a Gundam and be able to match a Gundam's might. And this just screams out how well the scientists were very careful about what they did.
Hmm.
They made sure that the real deal was not flooding into those machines. It was actually flooding in over here to these 2 Gundams that they just
Yeah.
randomly were driving off with bits and parts of.
Yep. So I want.
Oh, they got away with that.
There's something small that I'm not sure why it caught me. Before we go into the next Gundam, I'm pointing this out. Why is there fire in space? Like, there is so much fire on the base right now and on the moon. Like, Deathsight's walking epically through a cloud of fire, and then he makes a tornado of fire. And I'm just like, for some reason, while I was watching this, like, how did that, how did that happen? Like, how did, what's going on the moon right now that this is taking place?
Oh, who knows?
Did that catch you this time?
There's a lot of things that I go back and I look at and I'm like, how is that possible? Like, what is this?
Oh my
I
gosh.
mean, as kids, we don't sit there and we don't exactly just notice that sort of thing.
No.
But still, as adults, we're like, wait,
Exactly. Exactly.
happened. But then we're thinking about it. They're talking about a type of metal that doesn't exist.
Right.
And all this extra stuff that's going on. I mean, we know what happens when you blow something up in space. It goes floating around and, puts holes in things really easily.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it kind of, the reminder of what Gundam is and what we're watching.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. All right, let's talk about Wu Fei's Gundam, which when I doing the research caught me off guard because I did not expect it. I didn't realize its name was Ultron. Not Ultron for you MCU cats, but Ultron, Altron. That caught me off guard.
Yeah, that there's just no arguing with that. Yeah, the name shift didn't realize ever. Kind of feel bad that I didn't notice.
I'm wondering if they mention it later in the series, and that just because of what they were doing right now, or if do we miss it on the screens when they were looking at them? I don't know. I'm not sure why this struck me either. I'm just going, yeah, Nataku. Just and I think he continues to call it Nataku because that's the name of basically that's his ex or his deceased wife is Nataku, and so it's like the spirit of Nataku's with him, basically type of thing.
Mhm.
But it was just like Ultron. So,
I feel like
but
we're
there's
supposed to technically know that there's a name change, but that did not. That
right
didn't start
now
with
the
me.
name is interesting though. Looking up the information on it, it's called Ultron. It was equipped with two heads, hence the name Ultron. It was taken from the Chinese word, and I apologize to all the Chinese viewers. Air too long or two-headed dragon, which is one of the new changes to the Gundam, is that he now has not just one Gundam head, but or one dragon head, but he has two dragon heads that come off of him. And apparently, the point of this was to help increase his range. Like Death Scythe, he's a very much close in tight battler, but this helped him to they kind of refined his mid range a little bit with this.
Mhm.
So instead of like with Death Sight, where it was meant to make his infighting better, this was to help keep people back just a little bit further.
Yep. Well, I mean, just like we talked about with Duo's Gundam, it is 100% is customized.
Mm-hmm.
It is 100% him. I will say, I didn't actually like the original of his. For whatever reason, I think that the changeover helped
Mm-hmm.
in that regard. And I do like that. I mean, he literally gets in there, and I think it's probably the same for both of them. The fact that they both jump in these Gundams, and it's like they've been using the whole Gundam their entire life. I mean, it's
Right.
like, oh, it's no big deal. So,
I mean, to be fair, they spent a lot of time studying them, and the system, the way that they seem to describe it, the system to run each Gundam isn't so different. I think Zero, because it has the Zero system, is the one that's really, really different.
yeah.
So another interesting addition is that he now has a tail that is basically a beam rifle of some sort.
So I was just pulling up the armament part of this because it says Vulcan gun.
Mm-hmm.
It has a two beam cannon, which that's the tail. It's a flexible tail on
Mm-hmm.
the back. Okay, so which I find it interesting that they're doing a dual beam because Wing Zero's just come out and is a double beam barrel gun on him, and here this dude is one. Then you have the Dragon Fang, which is the forearms, it's the claws and stuff. The
Mhm.
flamethrowers, that legitimately that's always been cool on his Gundam.
Yeah. That's legitimately been like a pretty fascinating feature of who he is. But
Yeah.
it even speaks to like the rawness of Wu Fei himself.
Mhm.
Like unlike um unlike Heavy Arms who's just like shooting everywhere. I mean, it's like he's like, I will burn you to the ground.
That's true. And then he has the twin beam trident.
Right. Which was another interesting because in the first one, he just had like one like the trident was just the top portion. It was like a spear basically.
Mhm.
But now it's kind of more that quote unquote fancy martial arts that some people do that where he's got the ability to spin and attack both directions. Which again, that was part of the whole conversation of expanding his mid-range fighting.
Mhm.
Overall, I think that I'm with you in a lot of ways. The fact that I think this new design's cool. And I'm not really sure from it stylistically what it is. I don't know if it's just the dragons.
I think it's because it looks more balanced, honestly.
It does until you look at the shield, which is for some reason mounted up on the shoulder now.
Mhm.
That was weird. That was a decision somebody made.
Yeah, that was made. Uh, I don't know. I guess the one thing, and I do want to point this out because I was reading through this, and it is something that I've always noticed with his particular Gundam is he legit all of them know how to fight
Right.
person. And one of the special equipment and features that are in the Gundams, and specifically his, is called a fighting sight. And it allows them to be very calculated and precise on position, movement, and weak points of even an opponent.
Mm-hmm.
So it's custom built to at least assist them, but that is something that he naturally does on his own.
Right.
So if a Gundam is built with that in it and you already have that talent, how much more does that enhance what you're doing?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's like seriously precise.
Oh yeah. He
Even from childhood, long before he got plugged into the Gundams.
totally. And that was one of the things that you read about in the comic, in the manga itself, is that he was a studious person and he didn't just do stuff willy-nilly. That was actually some of the conflict with his bride to be was that she was a little bit more free spirited. Let me ask you about this. What are your thoughts on the fracturing political landscape of this particular series that's taking place? We start off with just the colonies versus Oz, and then you have Oz versus the Alliance, and then you have now two versions of Oz, the Alliance technically, some colony stuff taking place.
And the Trace faction is what the other part of Oz is.
Right, right. That's the two parts of Oz.
Yeah.
You have basically Tuberoff, and then you have Trace. Like this political landscape is falling apart. Like everything is, it's diversitizing and getting far more complicated. Like even in scenes in the when they are uh back on the base when they first capture Hero in Catra, it's like okay, this is Oz, but then you have the Trace faction who saves them, but then it's not the Trace faction, and now they're going back to the original Oz to do stuff for Oz, and
Mhm.
it's like it's this whole world is exploding right now.
It is, but at the same time, I think we talked about it probably last time, is the reality of any political situation. If you decide to teeter too far to the right or too far to the left and you hold that, at some point things are gonna start breaking apart because neither side is 100% in the right.
Right.
And so when you do that, you're gonna get fractures, and in this particular case, we have a perfect example of what happens when you take things too far.
Right.
And in this particular case, the Trace faction comes out because all these mobile dolls are going on, and then they go and they arrest Trace, which is,
Hmm.
not the smartest move in the world if you have people who are really loyal to him. But
Right.
and that's neither here nor there. We didn't say any of them were smart for what they do.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, you can kind of anticipate that at some point something was going to break because there's like infighting. Because if you're so focused on your own pride and your own, this is how it's going to be, and I'm not going to listen to anyone ever, you're going to have this happen.
Yeah,
I mean,
totally.
in this particular case, we've done a lot in the past episodes talking about Lady Un and her own mental fracture and breaking apart, and then ends up where she begins to rediscover herself. And in these particular episodes, um, she ends up standing up for Trays, but she also ends up doing the one thing that you wouldn't necessarily expect, but you can kind of see it coming because of how she's been dealing with the Gundam pilots.
Mm-hmm.
But she lets them go.
Yeah.
She finds a way to get them out, knowing darn well she's probably going to die.
Well, not just that, she eggs Tuberoff on. She's like, "Look, shoot me, go ahead,
Mhm.
like, like represent the odds that you claim to represent, because that's what should have happened for her disobeying everything."
Mhm. But at the
And
same time,
that
I think she was trying to buy them time long enough to get air back into their space and get them out.
possible, that's possible. I
So
did
yeah.
find her death fascinating, because when they shot her, it was kind of sad because she had just started that process of healing. And
Mhm.
that's really a sad thing for me when I see somebody that's been hurting for so long and they start to get that process of getting healthy, getting to the point, and then something tragically happens in their life like that.
Mhm.
That's depressing. But I was so glad to see that that took place with her doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Like, she could have done any number of things and kept living her life, but she chose to do the right thing.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of, when we started rewatching Gundam Wing, a lot of the questions of which is the good side, which is the bad side, because then you see all these variations of trays over here.
Mm-hmm.
And we kept seeing it's like a recurring theme. And it's almost like she kind of personifies the reality that you can find good in anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And so not everyone's 100% bad.
Exactly.
So I mean, I do like that.
There's some people who make it really hard to find good things about them,
That is true. There are some
but
people.
there can be a redeeming quality in
Yeah.
every person.
It's like you need to try and find the good if you can. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's a struggle, but in this particular case, she's been through so much, and you kind of in the past several episodes develop some sort of a compassion for her because you see her so fractured and so broken.
Hmm.
But in the end, she comes together and she ends up making a stand, and a stand
Yeah.
that really ends up kind of creating a shift in the war.
Yeah. I appreciated the way they drew her at the end, because when they shot her, she was very much Colonel Un. But at the end, as they fade away from her, as it pans out, the way they drew her, they softened her. It was not Colonel Un, but it was Lady Un
Mhm.
who was shot.
Yeah, I thought that was
So
really good too.
yeah. All right, Demar, anything else you want to say about the episodes?
Um, I will say you really do have to pay attention to even the short clips in the past 3 episodes to be
Mm-hmm.
able to fill in what's coming
Yeah.
down the pipeline. Um, but at the same time, I think I was so excited for these episodes, honestly, because Wing Zero was coming out and the reality of the system in Wing Zero.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I felt like I was half distracted when I first started that because I knew what was coming. And I still know what's coming, but we're not going to talk about that today. We're going to behave.
Right. Oh man. All right. Well, Demara, just throwing out, we normally ask the guys this, so I'm asking you this. We're rewatching this right now. If not for the show, if it wasn't for the fact that we have the show that we're doing right now, would you keep watching this series past this moment?
Um, I would and I have. That's my response to that.
I respect that answer because it's mine too. Again, it's one of those. I'm looking forward to certain things in the future of the series. Well, Gundam fans, you've heard from Damara and I. We both think we would. Hopefully, we'll hear from Branson and John down the road about what their thoughts were on their thing when we get to the next episodes. But reach out to us, let us know your thoughts. Look out for the Gundam Watch on Facebook, and Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know your thoughts or comment on the YouTube video. That being said, ladies and gentlemen, let's jump over to our next segment, the maintenance reports.
Cruise maintenance reports now loading in 3, 2, 1.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are now amid the maintenance reports. And as we dive into it, this is a segment where we take aspects that took place within the show, within the series, the movie that we just watched, and we pull out elements that are redeeming. Kind of like we talked about with Lady Oon. That could be another whole conversation. But but things are redeeming to inspire, to encourage, let you know that you're loved, you're cared for, and to point you to hope. And for us, we know that our hope is in Jesus Christ. So, Damara, what is your maintenance report for us today?
So, in the past, even before these 3 episodes, we've kind of had the beginning running theme of dealing with grief. We saw a lot of that in Catra.
Mm,
So that's I kind of wanted to go after that piece of it. And so it's going to be very strongly intertwined with my licensure. So,
do
um,
it.
just disclaimer, I'm going to read off the stages of grief. But if you are someone who reads the devotionals or you read some of the articles that pop up on the geekdevotions.com, this is already posted. It's called How to Grieve. It came out April 7th, 2019. I actually used this at my last job to describe grief, and it went absolutely wonderful. Um, so in the first part of the article, it actually gives you an idea of the 5 stages of grief that we know, especially here in the US, is typically what gets taught. But in the article, I actually kind of borrow from an article that came out of Australia where it breaks down further. So please, if you don't know them or you want to kind of dive in and get a little bit more information, or you've been dealing with grief, go find that article. Again,
Mm.
it came out April 17th or April 7th, excuse me, of 2019. You can check it out.
Link for that article will be in the show notes on YouTube and also the podcast.
Awesome. So to bring that up, throughout the episode, we have Catra that goes through this grief, and grief is not something that is ever planned for.
Mm,
Like, even if someone is passing away from cancer, we may have the idea that it's coming and we may begin to grieve sooner, but you do not plan, I'm going to grieve this date, 2 years down the road, I'm going to be grieving.
mm.
You really can't plan for it. So it's almost like a giant shock to the system.
Yeah, totally.
And this affects us, physically, mentally, and definitely spiritually. And in this regard, for Catra, we saw him just completely nearly shatter. And then, of course, he got into the Wing Zero and it amplified everything. But one of the things that are really important when we're dealing with grief and when we're seeking the Lord in things is we really have to know where our identity is in Christ. But at the same
Mm,
time, we have to know, where do you go when things go this far south, when you really take a shock to the system? Where is that place? Where is that refuge that you're supposed to go to?
hmm.
Everyone deals with grief a little bit differently. And sometimes we do have to go and isolate. Some people get really angry. But regardless, where you take your refuge is 100% important.
Yeah.
So I found this passage. It's in Psalms. It's Psalms 46. Um, I'm only going to read a few of the verses. I'm not going to read the whole chapter. But it starts out saying that God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, through the earth gives way. Though the mountains, be moved into the hearts of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble at its swelling, there is a river whose streams make glad the city of our God, the holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of her; she shall not be moved. God will help her when morning dawns. The nations rage and the kingdoms totter. He utters his voice, the earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress.
Mm-hmm.
And I like this passage because it's kind of really cut and dry, to be honest with you. It was a wonderful song. But it starts out saying that God is our refuge and he is our strength. When
Mm-hmm.
you're grieving, you don't feel like you have any strength to do
Yeah.
anything. So your strength has to come from something or somewhere else that is definitely not within you.
Right.
A lot of times that is going to the Lord. That involves going to the Lord and being around people who are also following the Lord. Because
Yeah.
sometimes you don't even know what to read in the Bible. You know, and
Mm.
multiple times we've grieved in our lifetime, and I don't think I had a clue where to just crack the Bible open and read. I could not tell you where Psalms 46 was when I was grieving.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be honest. I mean, that's just how bad grief can be. But
Sure.
having those people around you that you can talk to, that you can reach out to, they can be like, hey, let me read this to you. Let me just sit around with you. You don't even have to talk. You don't have to say anything. I can pray with you. Those are wonderful things. And it allows you to pull your strength from something that is definitely not within you.
Word.
But what I do love about this particular passage is sometimes we can grieve and we're still like we're not even grieving someone who's passed. We
Mm.
can grieve what's going on in our life, like moving on to the next stage in our life, whether it's going from one school to another school, whether it's moving jobs, if it's moving a house. We can grieve a lot of things in our lifetime. There's nothing that can't be there. But at the same time, this verse, even this chapter, goes into talking about nations that are at basically a war. We have a lot going on. We're human beings. There's a lot going on in the world, but if your refuge is Christ
Mm.
and you're reaching out and you're praying to the Lord, you can find peace in the biggest storm. In our house, we have a phrase that got put on the wall several years ago. I don't even know how long ago it went up there, to be honest with you. But it was talking about how that life was not about avoiding the storm or something like that, that it was about learning to dance in the rain instead.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of a testament to how we've grown up in life is when we gave our life to the Lord and when our whole family decided we're in this turmoil, we need to turn to God. We need our refuge to be rooted in the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
It taught us that we could have peace in the worst of situations, whether
Yeah.
it was grieving. In that time when we when we got into this house and we started putting things up, we had come through a pretty bad season in our life where things had fallen apart. We grieve things. We grieve what we could have had
Mm-hmm.
had things not changed. You know, as adults, I don't think we would change anything about our past now.
Right.
I mean, I think we'd keep it there because the Lord really moved in a lot of ways. But I guess my biggest takeaway from watching this today was we watched an entire several episodes where we watched a human being that was like the heart of a group of people completely break and shatter.
Yeah.
And his foundation was not necessarily where it should have been.
Mm-hmm.
So, and how many people do we run into in our lives that they look like they have it all together? But when they break, they still can break. So we almost have to learn to have grace for those people, but we also have to remember that sometimes we have to remind them of where their foundation is. And in
Yeah.
the ending episode where we have Ketra and Hero, someone had to rescue Ketra, but Ketra still had to pull Hero out of that Gundam.
Right.
Those are things that we have to think about. And that really made me think about this part. And where are you at? Where's your foundation? Is your refuge God? Or are you turning your refuge into something else?
Right.
If your refuge is going and drinking or using some drug, I can guarantee you I know where you're going to end up
Yeah.
because I've seen it. That's what I used to, I mean, that's what I do for a living for part of that.
Helping people get past that. Not you. You don't go drinking for a
Yeah,
living.
no, my job is how do I bring you to a place of restoration? How do we get you recentered? How do we help you defeat all of that stuff?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, the reality of it is you need to know where your foundation truly lies.
Yeah. Definitely. I was just talking with a young man Sunday at GeekCon, and I say Sunday, it's as the recording this, it was Sunday. Celeste and I were at GeekCon. We had a booth representing Geek Devotions as a whole, and I was talking with a young man about priorities, and he was really struggling with that, with some stuff. I was like, man, the reality is you need to work on your priorities. And there's a old illustration, you're familiar with it. Professor comes in, lays down a big tube, empty tube, and then puts on the table a bucket of big, huge balls, a bucket of small balls, a bucket of even smaller balls, and a bucket of sand. And he goes, all right, what's the most effective way to put it in there? And everyone thinks, oh, I'll just put these small things in it. And then you lead up to the big things. And when you do that, there's no room. And he said, but if you put the big things in first, create that foundation. These are the most important things in life, and get that solid. Then you find room for everything else. And for us, the foundation is Christ. Those are the main things. If we get that down, then there's room for all this other stuff that takes place. And then there's room to handle grief.
Mhm.
There's room to handle depression. There's room to handle fear. There's room to handle doubts about things. If we have that foundation set up correctly, it's all small stuff when compared to the foundation of who Christ is in our lives. And if we don't make room for it, then we can't handle it.
Exactly.
So cool beans. Well, Damara, I appreciate it. Those of you listening, has this encouraged you? Has this challenged you? Let us know. Reach out to us. Again, look for the Gundam Watch on Facebook, on Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know your thoughts. And we will love to communicate with you. We'll love to encourage you. If we can pray with you, let us know. If we can help you walk through some stuff. Maybe you just need an ear to listen. Maybe you just need someone to encourage you in some fashion. Let us know. We love to do that and be there with you. Damara, you got anything you want to promote?
Not really. Most of my stuff ends up going up on Geek Devotions. So, check out Geek Devotions.
All right. That's right. Check out geekdevotions.com, which is a central hub for all things Geek Devotions, which is like the bottom shelf. We read allegedly, the Gundam Watch, and the main show, Geek Devotions, which puts out devotions every Friday of information, positive, encouraging things based out of geek culture. That being said, if this particular week connection, there will be a written version of it up in the next few days on our website, thegundamwatch.wordpress.com. If you guys like to read that and share that with other individuals. And don't forget the article Damara shared with some real practical ways of handling grief, such as advice like don't isolate, have a confidant, acknowledge that your thoughts may be unrealistic, honor the loved ones and celebrate the life that they lived. Get a counselor, join a group, speak to the Lord. Practical things is on the website geekdevotions.com, but there will be a link in the description down below. So, all that being said, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay devoted. Peace and love.
This is Brent, sending out a distress signal to the Shiro base. I don't think I'm gonna make it. Do not move. Stay. No. No, don't give me that. Past the sun. When's Island? I don't even know where that is. Please send someone. I started hallucinating a few seconds ago. And I'm really worried. I mean, the last thing I want to do is send help. Please.